Welcome to the Wild Physio podcast with your host, Andrew Wild. Today, I have two of the world's glute experts on. I have Bret Contreras, who is the Glute Guy, and Aden, the Glute Guru, Gazi. Welcome, boys.
Thanks for having us.
How's it going, Andy? Thanks for having us on.
Really looking forward to it. And I'm going to start off with the yes, no, or maybe questions to start. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Should you train your glutes 2 to 3 times a week for optimal glute development? Bret?
No.
Aden?
Can I elaborate? No elaborating.
Well,
We're going to elaborate after. Aden?
I'll say maybe.
Is circuit training a poor idea for glute hypertrophy? Bret?
Yes.
Aden?
Yes.
Do you need to train to failure to maximize hypertrophy? Bret?
No.
Aden?
No/maybe.
Do glute mini bands help with glute hypertrophy? Bret?
Yes.
Aden?
Yes.
Are glute activation warm-ups necessary? Bret?
No.
Aden?
No.
Is the fitness industry too focused on glute-based sessions? Bret?
Probably yes. My
Yes.
fault.
and maybe we add to that, but yes.
Are machines just as effective as free weights for hypertrophy?
Yes.
Yes.
Is mind-muscle connection a waste of time without progressive overload for hypertrophy?
No, it's not a waste of time, but
I'll say no. I'm a no maybe, but more of a no.
Okay. Should you rest for 2 to 3 minutes in between each set to maximize your strength and hypertrophy gains?
yes.
I'm gonna say maybe more, and that's my elaboration.
All right, a few more to go. Are combined movements like a squat into a bicep curl into a shoulder press a waste of time for hypertrophy?
Yes.
Yes, and I like how you smiled when you were asking that question. I feel like you already knew the answer.
I'll hide. Is using a lifting tempo protocol such as 2010 overrated?
Yes.
I'll say maybe.
Is periodization overrated?
Yes.
I'll go maybe.
Do some strength coaches overcomplicate a lifting technique? And this is mostly online with Instagram, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Yes.
Do genetics play a huge role in your glute potential?
Yes.
Yes.
2 more. Do you need to do abductions to optimize your glute development?
Yes.
Yes.
Are squats or hip thrusts better for glute hypertrophy?
Wait, is that a yes or no
Yes
question?
or no?
It is not a yes. It is not a yes or no. This is a hip thrust or squat.
Hip thrust.
Yeah, thrusts.
Sweet. We're done.
We're done.
All right, wrap it up, boys. See you later.
Thanks, guys.
Nice knowing ya. Glutes.
I knew it. I knew Aiden and I would agree on every single thing pretty much.
Yeah.
And I knew you would as well, but it's good to just clarify. But also, a lot of the listeners, they'll probably want to know what the hell this podcast is about. And at least now they know. So let's dive into it, effectively go through some of them. The first one, I asked whether you need to train glutes 2 to 3 times to optimize glute hypertrophy. Bret, you said no. Why?
I think you could do 2 times if you go real hard. I think 3 times is best for most people. And I think 4 times, even 4, 5, 6, if you use mostly like hip thrusts and bands, training the glutes mostly at short lengths, you can do that. I also think maybe there's like case in point. I remember I was doing a powerlifting meet. My brother's like, you better like train super hard that week. And I was like, interestingly, most powerlifters taper, like all powerlifters, they taper that week and deload. And they've been pushing it so hard, they super compensate. With peaking practices, you typically go up 2 to 5% in strength. But my brother's speaking from experience, my twin brother, because we will take a week off and lose strength. You know, my friends would, when we go on a trip in like college, my lifting partner, Rob, he would set PRs when he came back. I would lose strength. So that mere fact alone, you know, the listeners will be like, yeah, when I take a week off, I gain strength. Or someone will go, when I take a week off, I feel like I'm starting over. That indicates that people recover at different rates. Some people, I'm training this high school kid right now, he's never sore. He wants to train 365 days a year. I'm trying to make him take a rest day here and there, but he's a freak. So my whole point is that there's a genetic element to frequency that you need to figure out as a lifter. And I know, and it's also different for different muscle groups and lifts. Like I can hit deadlifts once a week, but I have to bench 3 times a week if I want it to go up. So I don't mean to ramble on and on. I'm curious to hear what Aden says.
Aden?
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I agree 100%. I just think it's all about volume distribution. You know what I mean? And what your training split's going to be regards on, yes, your genetics, also just your preference as well. Because if you were to just hammer a leg session or leg/glutes session twice a week and go really hard with that, then that's fine. But you might hit 5 or 6 exercises, 5 or 7 exercises across that, and then you're done for the week. You can smash it out in 2 sessions. But if you want to spread that volume up across 4 or 5 sessions and then have the days where you're focusing a little more on your compound lifts and focusing on exercises where you hit more of a stretch, like your squats, your lunges, your deadlifts, etc., and then other days where you're focusing a little bit more on your like end range work, like your abductions, your kickbacks, your hip thrusts, etc., then I find that you can train with higher frequency but still have very effective recovery. Because the glutes, the glutes are unique, right? Like I think a lot of people worry about training the glutes too much when they see people say like you can train the glutes 3 to 6 times a week, but think about how much your glutes work. Like if you go to train quads, you're training your glutes. If you go to train hammies or pretty much any big compound movement for the lower body, unless you're directly isolating it, is pretty much going to be hitting the glutes. So if you can spread that volume up across the week and then have days where you are focusing on particular things, then I think that I would say probably a minimum of 3 days is probably the best. And you could probably even shoot for more if you know how to kind of divvy it up accordingly.
Now, how about if someone wanted to just absolutely smoke their glutes in one session and do 20 plus sets on their glutes for that session versus splitting that volume up over 2 or 3 sessions? Because some of the research suggests that if the volume's equated and the intensity is equated, it actually doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
But if you split it up over the week, then you're going to have less junk sets. What are your thoughts on the 1 versus 2 or 3, Bret?
I mean, I was just talking to Brad Schoenfeld. He just was here in Vegas, and he's arguably the top hypertrophy researcher in the world. And he's investigating that right now. And he's like, we're not finding a difference. And I'm like, I'm a lifter first. I'm 45 years old, but I'm still trying to make gains. You know, I'm a lifter first. I'm a trainer second. I'm a scientist third. And so I see that, I read it, and I'm like, it's not that I'm like, that I don't believe it. It's that I think sometimes it's hard to measure things, but like, I know my clients, if I had them train 1 hard session a week, they would not gain as much as, like, I'm training, you know, Aden and we train like 30 different clients always. We're always working with like 30 people. And so when we read a study and when we hear an expert make a bold claim, we quickly go, that's true for these 3 clients, but here's 3 of them I can think of where that's the opposite or something. So you have to have, I mean, think about it. Think about your 5th exercise. You're smoked.
Yeah.
Like, say you try to do a squat variation, a hip thrust variation, a deadlift variation, a lunge like a single leg squatting pattern, you know, like a kickback, and then 2 different abduction movements. Like by the time even if I do squats before hip thrusts, or like say I do too much deadlifts before, or front squats, or too many squats before I do deadlifts, I can feel the second exercise can be affected, but surely the 3rd exercise is affected. And so there comes a point where you're so weak, it's got to be like junk volume. Are you really stimulating hypertrophy? So I don't know. I don't know if we know enough about that, but just speaking as a trainer, I'd say, yeah, the more you split it up, the more high quality, kind of like unfatigued sessions you're getting in. But then on another note, because the lift you perform first sees the best results. But on another note, if you go too frequently, because I've trained glutes 3 days in a row just now, if I go too frequently, then you're never really fresh on any given day. You're always a little beat down. So it's kind of a trade-off. So that's why I think we settle on 3 days a week being the sweet spot.
Aden, anything to add?
Yeah, definitely. No, and I think you're absolutely right. I think there's pros and cons to both. And a lot of it does come down to preference. But let's say, for example, I like to say that there's sessions where you can go in with a lot of effort and the sessions where you can go in to do a lot of volume. If you're trying to hammer out a hip thrust, a squat, a deadlift, a back extension, a kickback, an abduction, an ETC, as Bret mentioned, as yourself mentioned, you're going to have a lot of energy to be able to go through those first maybe 2 exercises, those first big 6 sets. If you're going balls to wall, you know what I mean? And you're really pushing your sets hard and you like training to a failure. Then the remainder of that workout, how effective is your force production going to be on those lifts? And is fatigue going to be coming in and playing too much of a factor for you to be able to perform those lifts really well? You know what I mean? Whereas that would be tougher for somebody who likes to push their sets really close to a failure. But whereas somebody else who doesn't mind leaving a few reps in the tank, they might be able to get away with doing more volume across the session and getting a lot of those exercises in one hit because their fatigue won't accumulate as much throughout the session. They won't train as hard, but they'll be able to have a more effective session. But then, like Bret mentioned as well, those people who split their volume up across the week, they can go really hard. Like, for example, Bret, I'm pretty sure you use a pretty similar programming style where you go 3 days full body, where you hit the big lifts, and then other days where you come in and you tax your isolations and stuff like that as well, which is
three full body days and then 2 body weight and band days where it's like a 15-minute work, 20-minute workout where it's just you're not focused on progressive overload, and that works well. To me, that's the best way to program, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly right. I use a similar model, and I think it works really well because that way, the way I do it similar, but I won't have just bands and body weights, but I'll have like more isolation work like kickbacks and abductions and ETC. So rather than saying, okay, cool, I'm going to squat, I'm going to deadlift, I'm going to hip thrust, I'm going to do back extensions, I'm going to go really hard and tax all my energy, then I'm going to try and get strong at kickbacks or abductions. No fucking chance. And not only that, but if you're just going through a whole bunch of big compound movements, you're going to be taxed. You might be feeling a little bit in your lower back, but if you can just do 3 big lifts in a total body routine, focus on putting all your energy into those big lifts and getting really strong at those, then on an alternative day, focus on your isolations, focus on exercises which target the muscle in shortened lengths, which aren't going to necessarily impede your recovery, and do them fresh at the start of your workout. That gives you a chance not just to get that mind-muscle connection, but to also progressively overload in exercises where you're not necessarily just focusing on strengthening a movement, but you're actually taking a muscle close to a failure and actually getting a lot of local fatigue and local like activation. So
I agree. And it's much like the bro that goes in on a Monday and it's International Chest Day and they do 20 sets on chest. You know, I see so many clients, they come in and they tell me that they're doing this classic bro split. And then as soon as you split them up over the week in terms of their chest work, they might start benching twice a week and their bench goes through the roof.
Yeah.
Because they increase their frequency rather than just smoking it, because they're doing so many junk sets on that day. And I ask them, I'm like, on those last, say, 3 exercises or 2 exercises, how many in the tank do you really have? And you know deep down that those people are getting nowhere near failure and they're leaving so many reps in the tank because they just can't be fucked anymore and they just can't get all the way to the necessary stimulus they need.
Or Andrew, I remember when I used to do bro splits, my first 8 years of lifting from like 16 to 24, I did body part splits and I'd always want to burn out the muscle at the end of the workouts.
Yeah.
My chest workout would be like, say like bench, incline. One of them was DOMA. So like say bench, dumbbell incline, pec deck. Then I might hit triceps, and then I'd always want to do push-ups to burn out.
Yeah.
I like 10 push-ups and I'd be done. Like, how could that be? How could that be adding to the muscle growth if I can normally do like say 40 push-ups and I'm only getting 10? I remember being like, how can I only get 10 push-ups? I'm so fatigued. But that's one of those things where I think it's hard to answer this in a study. So then you get this happens sometimes. You get a lot of research indicating the same thing, and then I'm like, oh, it's so hard for me to believe it. Maybe it's different for glutes. I don't know, but
yeah, I think, to be honest with you, I think that the glutes are a little unique in the sense of being able to train them with more frequency. I think if I tried to like hit upper body pressing exercises and do that 5 or 6 days a week, I would die. My shoulders would be cooked. I just wouldn't be able to. And no matter how much, but the glutes are very unique in the way that you can target them with either one, compound lifts that distribute load across quads or hammies, or you can work them in lengthened ranges, which is going to require a little bit more recovery, or you can work them in shortened ranges, or you could do them very, very, very isolated in end ranges with kickbacks, abductions, which doesn't impede your recovery anywhere near as much.
Or you could focus more on upper versus lower.
Yeah, exactly right.
No, I've been doing that lately. Like I do more like squatting and lunging and stuff. Then the next day I'll hit more abduction stuff. Then the next day maybe hip thrust. But it's like, yes, my lower glutes are sore, but then my upper glutes can still, even with my low glutes sore from like lunges or Bulgarian split squats or something, I can still do abduction, like frontal plane abduction, just fine.
Well, the anatomy of the glutes really leads it into a good area of the body to actually target more regularly, because it is obviously multiplanar. And you talked about that before, yeah. So
I like to say that. Sorry to inject. I like to say, just touching on the anatomy, it's kind of like your glutes are like the shoulders of your legs, like kind of in a sense that they move around and they do everything. You know what I mean? Like they control everything. And how often do you get sore delts from doing lateral raises and stuff like that? You get an awesome pump and you can train them, but you can train them quite frequently. Like you could do lateral raises and rear delt work probably every day, especially if you're doing banded stuff. You know what I mean? So I think it's kind of similar in the sense for glutes. Can you go and do like overhead presses every single day? Probably not, but you can target the glutes in similar ways. Can you go and squat every single day? Probably not, but you can pick effective exercises given, for those particular muscle groups, which target the muscles slightly different, to be able to spread that volume across the week or put it all in one session. And you know what? It does come down to preference as well, because to be honest with you, as much as I like to like talk about all this and as much as that's how I like to program, for me, there's nothing better than fucking training chest tries and a little bit of fucking side delts. Getting that pump, you know what I mean? That's But that's also because I'm the same as Bret, and I grew up as a bro training body part splits for probably exactly the same time, from about 16 to about 25. So like at the end of the day, that's what I'm probably always still going to enjoy the most.
I think the other thing about it is if you absolutely smoke a muscle group in one session, it's really quite hard to recover from. And a lot of these people that are doing these sessions are often bodybuilders that are on steroids anyway.
Yeah.
So the general pop person that's not on steroids, if they absolutely smoke their one muscle group, say their chest or the glutes or whatever, and they do like 20 sets in one session, it's going to be pretty tough to recover from. Imagine if you did 20 sets on glutes in one session and went balls to wall, like you'd be cooked for a few days. This leads me into the next question in terms of training to failure. So you both answered when you said, do you need to train to failure? You said no. Aden, I think you said maybe. Now, we talked about obviously junk sets and not getting close to failure, and then that's obviously not going to stimulate the muscle potentially enough to induce a hypertrophic response. Why is it the case that you don't need to train all the way to failure, Bret, to maximize hypertrophy?
I mean, I'm just going off the literature there. You know, there's a lot of studies now at this point. And the bulk of them saying that, a lot of them saying you get better results when you don't train to failure. But what annoys me about that is then when you get all these guys that just read research and they don't spend ample time in the gym, then they'll be like, do not train to failure. It's like, calm down, like
Yeah.
you can do, I used to have back when we did seminars. Remember those days? Pre-COVID. I have a slide on training frequency. I'm like, it depends. Like if when you say don't go to failure, if I did rear delts once a week and I just did one set to failure of prone rear delt raises, like that doesn't even beat you up at all. It wouldn't even be a big deal. But if you did deadlifts twice a week and you did 5 sets to complete utter failure, that's a recipe for disaster. So it depends. It's nuanced. So I don't think it's, my clients train to failure a lot. And it's not just the science of pushing, like, yes, there's the whole like Henneman size principle where when you go, the closer you get to failure, you activate the higher threshold motor units. And I don't think of it like that. I think about people need to learn how to push themselves. And some people, like our client, like probably Aden and my clients get good at, like, especially when there's like different types of failure too. There's like psyched up, like competition style failure when you've got a room full of people and you've been pacing around listening to death metal or whatever psychs you up, and you have a scoop of pre-workout or an energy drink in you, and you're pacing around and you've been planning this for a week, this lift, and you've got 10 of your friends yelling at the top of their lungs, like, come on, get this. That might put 20 more pounds on your 1 rep max when you do that versus, and so there's different types of failure there. And then there's failure where you let your form break down a little bit versus like perfect form failure. And when I hate when people are like, there should be no difference between the two. You should always have perfect form. It's like, come on. You don't even
I
lift.
agree with that. I always say, if your last rep looks perfect, it probably shouldn't have been your last rep.
But anyway, I think, yes, good lifters go to failure, but they learn when, and they learn the practical aspect.
I think the other thing about it is a lot of people don't even know what failure is because they've never trained to failure.
Exactly right.
And a lot of the research with reps and reserve indicates that people have no idea how many reps they have actually in the tank, and they underestimate how many more they could do. Some people are like, oh yeah, I could have done 2. And I have clients do this. Oh yeah, I had 2. And then I'm like, all right, next set, you keep going. And they do another 10. And you're like, no, you had 10 in the tank. Anything to add, Aden, about that?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because this is a story that I tell all the time about one of our little superstars down at the booty base. Her name is Rachel Bulkey. And she got incredible results. Like, I still remember the first time she came down. This literally happened on the first session she came down. We do this learn to lift session where we sign up all of our new members. We put them through all of our lifts. And I looked at this girl and I was like, this girl's got good frame. I can tell she trains hard. And I was wrong. I can tell she trains frequently. And she did. She would train with her boyfriend. She would go to the gym. She had like decent shape and all the rest, but she was quite petite, wanted to add a lot of weight. And she did. As soon as she trained at the booty base, she gained like 6 kilos over the course of like a couple of weeks and has one of the biggest set of glutes there. But on her first session, I demonstrated her with hip thrusts. And I asked her right before in front of group. And in fairness, this is one of those situations where it was in a group environment. So the situation probably heightened her ability to perform. But I asked her, have you hip thrusted before? She goes, yeah. I go, okay, cool. How much weight do you use? She goes, 60 kilos. I go, okay, cool. What do you normally do with that? She goes, like 3 sets of 10 reps. I go, okay, cool. All right. Let's see how we go. And I had no idea, but I had a good feeling she'd be able to get more than 10. She got to 10 reps. So keep going. 15, keep going. 20, keep going. She got all the way up to 30 reps with like a 5-second hold on her last rep. So the reason why so many girls at the booty base get incredible results, I like to credit it to my programming, and it definitely does have a part of it, but we put them in an environment where we teach them how to actually fucking push hard. We teach them the importance of effort and teach them the importance of actually training either to or close to a failure. I definitely don't think that you need to train to failure on every single set, definitely not. And I think that it is also very much exercise dependent, like Bret mentioned. exercise, your big compound lifts where it's a movement that you're trying to strengthen and there's a lot of working parts, and then you're focusing more on those external cues. And if they start to go out the window, then you could potentially harm yourself. Then it's probably smarter to leave 1 or 2 in the tank, not just because you could injure yourself in that particular set, but more importantly, because how much energy is that taking away from your following sets as well. But whereas something like a machine, where you're in a completely stable environment, like I do it a lot of the time for the girls after their first month, I take them over to the hack squat, and I say, all right, you've been here for a month now. I'm going to show you what real fucking failure looks like. And we do a high rep set on the hack squat to failure. And then every single time they get off, and I can guarantee you they're fucked, but they feel so empowered because they're like, I did not think that I could do that. Do you know what I mean? So I think that getting your clients or even yourself to be able to take yourself to absolute fucking failure, muscular failure in a safe environment where you can't hurt yourself every now and then is a really good thing, because it shows you your limits. Because I feel like a lot of people really have no idea how to actually push hard.
And that's one of the reasons why the hip thrust is so good as well, because you can push it to failure in more of a safe environment. You know, a lot of people have this inherent, they freak out about deadlifts because they've heard that deadlifts are bad for your back when they're not. And then things like squat, if you go to failure on a back squat, that's kind of scary, because if you get to the bottom and you can't get back up, you've got to get rid of the bar and you're like, fuck, what do I do? Sorry, Brett, what were you going to say?
It brings up an interesting topic of what is failure. All right, full range of motion with incredible form, with perfect technical form. Well, I would argue then we all push our sets past failure with hip thrusts. I was looking at my set. I posted it last night, I think. I'm like, some of the reps, I'm not coming up all the way. I'm leaving a few inches in the top. I'm trying to push it hard, but so theoretically you're going past failure because you're doing partials at that point. You think of partials as like you can't do another set of rep of squats. So then you start doing half squats, then quarter squats. But like we kind of do that on hip thrusts a little bit anyway, because you look at your last rep, it's usually not quite as high. At your first rep, you might have the bar come up to here. 10th rep, it might be to here. There might be like but I have a similar story to Aden's, and this was, I think it was like 2012, 2013, when I first realized this woman, Allison, came to me. She stayed in Phoenix for, I think, 9 days. So I trained her like 4 or 5 times. She put on 2 inches on her glutes during those 9 days. Wow. That's insane, right?
Yeah.
Insane. Like, you guys go by centimeter. What is that, like 4 centimeters or something? Or
about 5, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we're pretty cluey with inches. Yeah, inches is like what?
So anyway,
everyone knows what 6 inches is.
Obviously, obviously the pump factored into that, but she kept those. She didn't then shrink down. But when she came to me, she thought she was pushing hard, like what Aden said. She thought she was, but she just had no clue. So she started off doing. She's like, I'm like, what do you do with your sets? 135 for 3 sets of 10. You know, so 60 kgs, 3 sets of 10. And by the time she left, she was doing 120 for, 3 sets of 10, but she was doing like 140 for sets of 5, but she could do 60 kgs for 3 sets of 30 on her last workout. So I was taking her 10 rep max and having her do 30 reps with it after 4 sessions later, because she was so much capable of so much more. But that brings up an interesting point where we just mentioned there's some people who think they're going hard and they're not even coming close. And there are other people who they kind of go too hard. Like you watch them and you're like, you should stop the set now. You shouldn't squeeze out those last 2 because they're partials and you're kind of reinforcing bad habits, Yeah.
And I've got some clients where I'll tell them like, all right, leave it there. And they're like, nah, I got fucking 2 or 3 more. And I'm like, wow, you really did. Like, good work. And they can grind through and still maintain good technique. And even I thought, and I push people fucking hard. And even I was like, all right, stop there. And they can push through. And then inversely, I've got other people who I'm like, all right, come on, 5 more. And then they do like 1 or 2 more reps and then they just die in the ass. So everyone's...
People are always like, damn, you had like 2 more in you. And I don't. I peter out. Like on bench, everything. I'm like, the last one will come up fast. And people are like, 2 more. And I rack it because I'm like, I know I would fail the next one.
Yeah.
I've still out where there's these grinders that, you know, they'll be doing chin-ups and it's like shaking. You're like, ugh. And you think they're done and they squeeze out 3 more after that.
Yeah. It's crazy. And just
So
touching on,
if you're that type of lifter, the grinders probably shouldn't grind so much because it probably taxes you a lot. And then the people who peter out quickly probably could do more sets to failure than the ones who are better at it, you know. And that's like a weird genetic aspect. It's lift dependent too.
yeah. One little like protocol that I like to kind of use for somebody who might be a little more experienced, or somebody who might know how to use like reps in reserve and things like that. Because I feel like we've touched a lot on beginners needing to train harder, and then just like the end of your sets. But just to kind of segue into this, so I like to say that, let's say for example, for me, like I'm actually really shit at like military press, and I always find that my reps degrade as I go through if I push them to absolute failure. So say for example, I got 12 on my first set and 12 was like true failure, then I'll rest appropriately and all the rest. I'll go into my next set and then I probably won't get 12. I might get maybe 10 or 11. And then my next set, I might get 8 or 9. Every single one of those sets, if I push to failure, technically speaking, I mean, I'm getting 3 to 5 good effective reps in every single one of those sets. But if I wanted to leave a few reps in reserve and try to aim to get 12 reps every time, then I'll try to get 10 reps every time rather, then on my first set, I'll intelligently stop at 10, knowing that I've got 2 reps in reserve. I still had a good quality set. And I know that my next set, I'll stop at 10, and then I'll probably only have 1 rep in reserve on that second set. And then my third set, I'll push to 10, and I know that there's not a fucking chance I could get an 11th rep. So my last set was at failure because my fatigue just kicked in. So you intelligently leave a little bit, but then other times you just say, fuck it, I'm feeling strong as hell, and I want to put all my energy into my first set, and I don't care if my reps degrade on the back end of my set. So pick your poison.
Yeah, it's definitely individual. And I have some clients that come in and they're chasing soreness all the time, and they think that they need to push all the way to failure all the time. So they're sore after each session. And I see this all the time. They come in because obviously I see them because they're injured, and they come in and I'm like, leave a few extras in the tank. And the thing is, A, they don't get injured, but B, all their lifts go up.
Yeah.
So, and then one of the things you might do is increase lifting frequency rather than them, smoking one body part in one session. Now, let's jump into this lifting tempo. I think this gets way too much airtime. Lifting tempo, and you both said that lifting tempo such as a 2010 is overrated. Why did you answer that? We'll start with Aden.
So I think I said maybe with that. So I do definitely think it's overrated. I don't know if it's because I don't like numbers and numbers fucking freak me out, but I don't ever program like with that like 4010 or whatever else, 2010. I just say, keep your eccentric a little slower on this if you're doing an RDL, you know what I mean? Like, or if they're doing a hip thrust, I tell them pause for 2 to 3 seconds at the top. I don't think that you need to be super nuanced with like tempo frequencies and modulating them across program to program. I think it can be an effective way to be able to strengthen a particular range or a particular portion of a lift. But I don't think that it's anything that needs to be overcomplicated or looked into too much. Majority of the time, do an exercise, control it with a decent tempo, which feels natural, and get strong in it. And then if you wanted to emphasize a particular part of that, whether it be the eccentric or whether it be the contraction, then add a pause or slow it down.
Right.
Yep, I agree. So I know in the research, it's like anywhere from 2 to 9 seconds, it didn't matter with hypertrophy. Going super slow, I've noticed with just my own experiments, you don't get this high of EMG when you're going really slow. Like your EMG activity, muscle activation goes down. And that's when it's like super slow as a way of training. It's like super slow trademarked. That's where I think you do a 10-second concentric and then a 5-second eccentric or so. I can't remember exactly, but that's actually been shown repeatedly to be inferior. I also think if you go too explosive, like say you lift too explosively in a hip thrust, then you build up so much momentum that you fly into the lockout, and you want that lockout to be. But in general, most people have a good tempo. You don't need to tell them. So when I do programs, I say just do the tempo how it feels natural to you. And if I want you to alter tempo, I will tell you. And I only alter tempo with pauses, in which case we either do a 1 second. It's always odd numbers. You can't do even numbers. I jokingly, I never add. I never say 2 second or 4 second pauses.
It's always 1, 3, or 5. Yeah, I'm the same.
1, 3, or 5.
It's funny how things work. Like with reps, I hate doing anything that's
odd.
That's odd.
No odd reps.
Pauses, right. It needs to be
reps. I always, if a client ends on an odd rep, I'm like, but 5s are okay. 5s are fine, but not 7.
Yeah, 5s and 15s are the only odds.
Or with eccentric accentuated, I say, it might be a 4-second lowering count. But my problem with tempo, I would read these guys, I can think of one popular guy back in the day, and he'd always say like 2-1, 4-1 or whatever, like 2-second rising phase, 1-second pause, 4-second lowering phase, 1-second pause. So that's 8 seconds per rep. Like who the hell does 8 seconds per rep? Most people, it's, most lifts, it's like, and when I really learned this was when Instagram came out, because remember when we only had 15-second clips back in the day? So I'd go, well, I can, this girl did constant tension hip thrust. I can fit in a set of 20 with her because she went so fast. They're doing a rep a second. Frog pumps are like 0.75 seconds per rep. It's such a short, frog pumps are a short range. Shrugs, calf raises. You're going to be like shrugs, 1001, 1002, 1001. Then 4 seconds, 1001, 2, 3, 4, pause. Like no one lifts that way. So it always annoyed me. Yes, on the larger range of motions, you do like a deficit, like a snatch grip, snatch grip deficit deadlift. Yeah, that's going to take a lot longer than a shorter range movement. But in general, just, it depends on the lifter's anatomy and their height. It depends on, their preference too. Some people lift under more control, some people a little more explosive. So it's a nuanced topic, but I only say don't mind tempo unless. But I will say, like a lot of women who have like a yoga or Pilates background, they're too slow.
Agreed. Yes.
They start working with me and they're like trying to be so slow and controlled, and they do better when they learn to be a little more explosive with it.
I think I'm generalizing.
One more anecdote, because I just started working with, Ashton, my high school kid, and I watch him and his friends train, and I'm like, they're the worst. These high school kids. I didn't know you can be doing deadlifts and actually accelerate it on the way down to get a bigger bounce. But yes, apparently you can do that. Like they will do anything to get an extra rep. They will bounce the bar. They have the worst form. So I'm working with him and being like, pay better. Now he's getting really good form and he's getting cocky about it. So he start judging everyone else with their quarter squats and bouncy reps and things like that. But anyway, go ahead. I want to hear what you had to say.
I think it's generalizing it a bit, but a general rule would be most women probably lift too slow in a way, and a lot of men lift way too fast. I see that a lot.
Yeah.
That's generalizing it, but I think across the board, what I've seen over the years, I think there's a lot of men, especially with things like squats and bench, they just go way too fast.
Yeah, and I think I think I'm glad you mentioned that actually, because I think it's an ego thing. For the men, and I think, not so much ego. I think it might be a little bit of a gender specific thing, right? Girls probably go slow because they're like, I really want to feel this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Girls like focusing on their feelings. You know what I mean? And feeling the muscle and getting that slow contraction. Guys, they just want to fucking look strong. You know what I mean? So, and you got to find that middle ground. Don't lift so heavy so that you need to either gain momentum or do quarter reps or whatever else it might be. just to feed your ego. But at the same time, don't focus so much on the mind-muscle connection to the point where you're just doing really slow reps to be able to feel the weight more. Instead, find that middle ground where you can lift a decently tough load with a regular tempo where you can still feel everything, and your set stops not because of the sensation, but because you actually trained the muscle hard through a full range of motion with whatever tempo that you did, and you were training close to failure.
I think the other thing with the whole lifting tempo of, say, a 2-1-2-1, good luck trying to count that when you're trying to think of the actual movement.
100%.
Like I've tried that. I've tried that before myself. I'm doing like a seated row and I'm like doing 2 and then 1. And then I'm just like, no, I want to think about what I'm actually doing. I'm trying to get the reps as well.
100%. And I 100% agree with that. I always like to say training and good programming is a science and an art. And then training in itself is such a personal thing. And it's so much more than just a program. People go to the gym to be able to release their energy, to be able to let their demons out, to be able to cope with shit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm having a fucking shit day, I'm going into that set, like, you know what I mean? Like, releasing all my negative energy. I'm fucking amping. I'm thinking about shit that pissed me off when I was 6 years old. You know what I mean? I don't have time to be counting reps. I don't have time to be fucking counting tempo. I'm too busy fucking punching Gary, who fucking kicked sand at me in the sand bit.
As a researcher, you realize that, because if you have a set tempo, say it's because the peer reviewers want to see that. And it's annoying because let's say I said, yeah, it has to be a 2-second concentric, 1 second pause, 4-second eccentric, whatever. Say it's 1 second concentric, 2-second eccentric. You get to a point where, say I'm doing bench press, say I'm doing a set of 10, I might get 6 in a row. Then I'm like, 2 more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just strayed from the tempo. In order to go close to failure, you necessarily stray from the tempo. So then what's
exactly right.
What's the point? So if you were being a strict researcher, technically you would have had to stop them at rep 6.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Then it's not a good study, because you either lied about the methods and let them keep going, or you cut them off at rep 6, and they're not even representing what you do in the gym. They have no ecological validity. So that's a problem I have with getting things published, to deal with these snarky peer reviewers that makes it a worse study.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's one thing that I speak to all the girls who join. I did a post about it actually not long ago. It was called First 3 versus Final 3. And it's comparing your first 3 reps and the tempo and how they look versus your last 3 reps and the tempo and how they look. And I always express to the girls that if your last 3 reps look and feel anything like your first 3 reps, especially in like a 10 or 15 rep set, then they were not your last 3 reps. Like your final 3 to 5 reps should be slowing down. You shouldn't be able to concentrically speed the bar up any faster. And that's how you know, that is the signal to you that you are training close to a failure, because you can no longer control, at the very least, the concentric phase of your tempo. So that's what I tell the girls. I go, when your set really begins when your reps unintentionally start slowing down, because you're pushing so hard but you couldn't make it go any faster even if you tried.
Yeah, that is a great point, Aden, for sure. Now,
one more point of contention here is just an aside. I hate when people say, well, I'm doing pauses or I'm doing eccentric, accentuated for more time under tension. Do you really get more time under tension? Like if I did push-ups fast, if I did push-ups normal, if I did push-ups slow, I don't know. Something tells me my set would end up lasting 60 seconds, no matter how I sliced it, or something, you know what I mean? So I don't think you get more time you're under tension for 60 seconds, any which way you slice it. It might be more time under tension in the stretch or in the contract, like more time under tension where it counts, but it needs to be specified, because it's not more time under tension, or else then if that were the case, then we should be doing all pauses and eccentric accentuated.
Yeah, great point. Now, next question, and we'll dive into why you said a lot of people online overcomplicate lifting technique. I see this so much now where coaches are just diving into, and there's a few that I'm not going to name, but there's a few that dive into it way too much. You know, it has to be in the perfect alignment for the muscle and this and that. Brett, why did you say
I
what
want to
you
know who you're
said?
thinking of. After the podcast, you could.
Yeah, I think we all know.
But anyway, I come from that school where it's like you need to have perfect form or you're going to hurt yourself. And then it was the physios, really, the pain scientists and physical therapists who really helped. They helped the field by letting people know, like, look at all these studies, and there's even some research that indicates that slight rounding of your back is safer than keeping the arch. There's a new study showing that. I think what's hard for the strength coaches to grasp, you know, I look at me, like my squat is so strong, and you know, I've got Ashley Hodge pulling 405 pounds. I've got 3 lifters capable of pulling 405, actually 4 capable of pulling 405. But you know, you do this, you build up, and then you get hurt, and then it takes you down a notch. Usually when they get hurt, they're rounding. So then you think round back deadlifts are bad. Well, I will say that out of the things that we talk about with form, knee caving, knee valgus is not very dangerous. I've never met someone who hurt their knees caving in. Could it lead to pain over time? Maybe if you're like caving so much, but knee caving, I feel like is a false, it's just something we invented. But it just looks so much prettier. What I say to all those guys, okay, you're a strength coach. You're going to tell people, let your knees touch, let them touch as you're squatting. Are you going to let your clients look like that? And when you teach them deadlifts, you're going to try and teach them how to keep an arch. You're going to just say, just pick, I mean, if you take it to extreme, it's like, all right, I'm not even a coach. I'm not going to give cues. My gym is just my members come in and I load them up and I just, whatever their form looks like, I make sure they hit depth or whatever. And I just go, good job. Nice. I think you'd have way more injuries that way, but that remains to be seen. I think that's so obvious. I think when you start, I mean, look at CrossFit when it started, there were so many injuries left and right because there wasn't an emphasis on form.
Do you think,
so
do you think that that's because of form, or do you think it's just because of the load?
I think
And
it's
the increase in load. I think it's a combination of both. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's both. But the pain scientists, physical therapists who champion this movement might disagree, but we need to respect each other and not get so. But I will tell you, it does annoy me because I made a post like I don't know, maybe it was like 4 months ago or something. It was a piece of paper I drew on stick figures, like do this, not this. And I drew like rounding and do this instead, arch. And it got so many likes and it got pissed off. You know, like Adam Meekins and Greg Lehman and all these people. And they're my colleagues. I want them to respect me. And it made them mad because I'm popular. I have 1 million followers on Instagram. People expect me to, and I have a PhD. So people expect me to have a more accurate material out there. And I do agree, I shouldn't have posted that and I should have elaborated on it. Like,
can I just quickly interject there for a second, Brett?
Yeah, good.
Just to touch on that, because I agree, like you have a PhD, you have 1 million followers, all the rest. Elaborating on topics in certain aspects is great. But think about how many of those 1 million followers would understand elaborative, nuanced detail versus a stick figure, which might actually genuinely help them. Because I feel like it's important for us who are preaching to be able to flex our knowledge, but explain it in a way that's understandable for people with where they're at. And I think that there's nothing wrong with posting a stick figure post. You know what I mean? Because you put so much other great quality information out there with more in depth. You know what I mean? Like explanations.
I think I could have pulled it off. I should have said like, this might be better than this, and I could have said in the caption, lifting technique is overrated. Like it's perfect form is it's because it's fear mongering, and then people, and it's also sets us up to judge each other. I'm so sick of like, I round my back during deadlifts and I get all these rookies who have never touched a weight in their life commenting like crappy form. And I'm like, I probably hurt myself less than you hurt yourself. A, B, I'm deadlifting 605 for 5 and you can pull. I just went on your page and looked and you're pulling 315. I could do that literally my first month at deadlifting. I pulled, not to play that card because I suck at squats and I hate when people act like I don't know what I'm talking about because my squat sucks. But my point is, I want to normalize rounding a little bit and not having people freak out about it. Butt wink. I don't think butt wink's nearly as dangerous as people think. Knee valgus to me is like a non-issue almost, but rounding on the back is the one thing that kind of we have a hard time selling on. And I think here's why. You have those certain lifters when they round, they hurt themselves right away. It's like they need to stay perfectly arched when they deadlift because if they round a little bit, they hurt themselves. Could those people build up tolerance? Could you start them off real light with like Jefferson deadlifts and build them up over time? Could they ever build up the disc strength and ligament strength and things like that? Maybe, but I think there's just anatomical reasons why some people put a lot more stress somewhere than others. And we all have to learn what's best for us. Bottom line, it's a complicated, nuanced topic and it's hard to, but we all need to have respect. And you have, when you're all the way over here, that strength coach that's like, or that power lifter that's like, you need perfect technical form or else you don't know what you're doing. I'm superior to all of you because my clients have better form, versus that pain researcher that's like lifting form doesn't matter at all, but he's never trained anyone, never gotten anyone strong. These two sides need to be right here and meet in the middle.
Yeah, I agree. And there needs to be a differentiation between injury and performance. I think that's the other thing as well, because if you look at the research in terms of lifting technique, a certain lifting technique might not cause an injury, and pain is so multifactorial that we need to consider that. But for performance, an optimal lifting technique will probably be better than someone that picks up a bar whatever way they think.
Yeah.
Got anything to add, Bret?
Me?
Either or.
Yeah. I'll touch. There's a few things I want to divulge into something which is similar but slightly different to what you asked. Just touching on what Bret was saying, I think it's very important as well, just to understand that again, everyone's a little different. Like, for example, it was literally last night, the night before, I was training one of my clients, trying to fix her deadlift because just her lumbar spine it does this weird little, like, it just rounds just a little bit. It looks a little bit odd. And to be honest with you, I've tried to fix it a couple of times, but she can progressively get stronger and stronger. She has absolutely no pain with it whatsoever. And then I'll get to the point where maybe it's looking a bit, and I'm like, call your set there. But a lot of the time, if I was looking at that and that was me, I would have said, stop your set 3 or 4 reps ago. But for her, she's fine. She can tolerate it. She's okay with it. So it's like, the more and more I get to know a client who might have a slightly different technique to what's standard or what's normal, like accepted as great stellar technique, you learn to understand that maybe their mechanics are just a little different, and maybe they can get stronger with whatever flaw you're kind of looking at.
I think the other thing about this is, and we're opening a can of worms here with that flexion debate, but when you do a deadlift, squat, good morning, kettlebell swing, whatever, you're going to inherently get lumbar flexion, and it's unavoidable. And we know that with the research. And ironically, a lot of that research is done by the people that say that spinal flexion is really bad, and potential chance of injury is there when you do get that spinal flexion. So look, I've done a podcast on this spinal flexion stuff before, and Bret and I have had a chat recently about a debate that was done between 2 clinicians in the area. And look, it is a very nuanced topic. But I think the other thing that I wanted to ask was about the people overcomplicating lifting technique when it comes to certain things like shoulders and like doing a lateral raise, and it needs to be in this perfect plane of movement. And are we better off to stop focusing so much on perfect technique with things like that, are we just kind of squeeze that last little bit out of the lemon when we don't really need to, when we should just be focusing on progressive overload or your big compound lifts?
Yeah, that was where I wanted to dive into next. Look, I think yes and no. I think that posting that kind of stuff is nice to educate on particular, ideal ranges or ideal paths or ideal resistance profiles or whatever it might be. But focusing purely on that just to sound smart rather than teaching people, hey, get fucking strong. You know what I mean? Like teach people, like empower them with with education that helps them to be able to move forward and set goals and be strong, rather than just always focusing on those tiny little nuanced details that do make a difference. But it's like, if you're solely posting just to make yourself sound smart and flex about whether something should be, in the sagittal plane or in whatever, you know what I mean? Like it's just, I feel like you can do a better job of creating content that helps people to not complicate things and teach them what they should do. And moving away from shoulders, I see this a lot with people, like, for example, bashing a sumo deadlift, saying that I see some people, sumo deadlifts, they're not for glutes. They're not, you know what I mean? Like, why are you doing this? They work more adductors, they work more quads. Yeah, they do. But now there's a lot of girls out there who prefer doing a sumo deadlift because, one, maybe they just like it better. You know what I mean? Maybe they just enjoy it. Two, it probably just suits their mechanics a lot better as well. Me, I'm a sumo deadlifter through and through. You know what I mean? And conventionals, I don't mind them, but I just like doing my sumos. I'm intelligent enough to know that I'm not going to go listen to some person who's posting something saying, sumo deadlifts are not the ideal exercise for glutes. But a lot of other girls out there, maybe they've only done sumo deadlifts, and now they're like, oh, I'm not going to deadlift anymore because this person said that it's not good or it's not ideal for the glutes. It's like, fucking settle down, mate. Like, settle down. Like, okay, maybe doing a Romanian deadlift is a little better for hypertrophy, but stop bashing exercises to sound smart and saying that they're not this or they're not that or they're whatever else it might be. I see other people saying like barbell squats are the most overrated exercise of all time, and posting that like in a time of like lockdown around the world where a lot of people, and they're saying, why do barbell squats when you can do like machine squats and all the rest? I'm like, motherfucker, every gym around the world is closed right now. You're posting content like this when a lot of the time people might only have access to very simple and basic equipment to be able to train with. Like, it's a lot of misinformation about what's perfect rather than what do you have, what do you enjoy, and what can you adhere to get stronger over time and enjoy your training.
Got anything to add, Bret?
Well, going back to your lateral raise example, I know for me, like maybe it's something about my shoulder mechanics, but if I do, the thumb down, internal rotation, versus like just allowing a little bit, either neutral, even slightly extra. If I go heavy and I end up here, I mean, I'm not talking here like a complete external rotation, but I still feel it in my delts, but I feel like it's all right. I have not seen one study. Brad and I want to conduct a study on this about different levels of internal shoulder rotation with lateral raises. Do you get more lateral delta activity? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but there's also this like longevity thing. Like when they just feel better when I'm like this and not quite like, and I see some people he's so strict there. And then some people, it's so hard to teach them good lateral raises. It's like my client, Larita, it's like she's incapable of doing a aesthetically pleasing lateral raise. So what am I supposed to do? Make her feel terrible about it every time she does it by harping up. Finally, I'm just like, let her do it. And I'm like, you look fine. So I think that it's not that big of a deal. Some people overcomplicate things. And I think some exercise we do need to chill out on. We don't have enough information. Like, and when you see a coach training someone or a lifter, you don't have all the information. Like what Aden said, maybe they prefer it. Maybe they feel this movement more. I know a lot of the things I read about glutes are just flat out wrong. Like sumo deadlifts work your glutes great. Abduction and external rotation is good for your glutes. And it's also, you feel a bigger stretch in your adductors, but actually decreases the moment arm for the adductors. So it's not just waist, it's not all adductor. That's what I've heard, but these aren't biomechanists who are saying this. It's people moonlighting in biomechanics or self-taught. So I'd like to see a consensus on, well, I don't feel like we can get there because that's how a lot of these people get their shares, they get their likes from being the anti, everyone likes this movement, I'm going to bash the hell out of it. And then that's the only way some of these people get attention. And I love exercises. I love every exercise. I love leg extensions. I love all the ones that get bashed. I love dips still. I love even behind the neck presses. I'm like, I loved behind the neck press. Then one day I was like, oh, I've lost mobility. And I'm like, what do we do to gain mobility? Scapular wall slides. Well, doesn't this look like a behind the neck press? Like, so what if I just never stopped doing them? I probably would have retained more mobility. But it's a nuanced topic as well. It's it's because you're always blending in like people's anatomy with their preferences, with their muscle attachment sites and all these things, and their goals. And also variety is good. So if I only did behind the neck press all the time, or if I only did some variation all the time, maybe I end up getting hurt. But what if I just do it for a 4-week cycle and then rotate it out? That's not that big of a deal,
Yeah. I think the other thing with overcomplicating the lifting technique, it creates a barrier as well to people going into the gym and enjoying themselves and choosing exercises that they really like. We've got an obesity epidemic. We're not really fighting that battle very well, and we're not winning that battle. And then people are like fighting about, how to do a certain exercise when you should be just encouraging people to get in the gym and do exercise. 100%. Because I just find that really frustrating. It's creating a barrier to exercise that we don't need.
Yeah, I think it's very contextual as well. Like, for example, I have a lot of clients who I know they don't fucking care about the education of resistance profiles and whatever else. You know what I mean? And a lot of the time, for the girls who are the beginners, you know what I mean, at the gym, then I'll speak to them mostly in layman's terms. And then if I can pick up that they're the kind of person that's a little bit more interested in knowing more, then I'll delve a little bit deeper if they ask me a question. I have other girls who deliberately come up and ask me very specific questions, and I can delve into a fucking 10-minute response about one tiny little question if I feel that it's appropriate to give that information. You know what I mean? So like sometimes I'll create a post and it would just be like a basic like technique tip. And then people are like, oh yeah, but what about this, and this? I'm like, mate, it's a fucking 15-second video. Get over it. Like I'm not, I'm just here to explain the basics of this particular thing. So I think, is it a bad thing to overcomplicate things? Not necessarily. I don't think it's a bad thing, but if you overemphasize that, unless that's specifically the audience that you're trying to teach to, you know what I mean? Like if you're putting out content purely for people who are trying to, you know what I mean, learn all those nuanced little things, then I mean, I understand it. But for myself and Bret, I feel like we want to be able to reach a larger population and just encourage people to be able to move, get strong, you know what I mean? And we sprinkle in the nuanced details across that. But the overarching message is we want to get you to fucking get strong, be confident, and live the best life that you can without overcomplicating things too much.
And keep lifting for decades, like that's one thing I stress in this high school kid I'm training. I'm like, if I didn't come into your life, you would have gotten strong, but probably injured yourself. It's like there was a popular power lifter because this Ashton, he's so strong. He's already 17. He's squatting like 550 and deadlifting 620 last night before he's even 18, but his lifts are going through the roof. But I make him rest more. And then when he has a bad day, I tell him you're done. And that's counterintuitive. When someone has a bad day, they think, oh, I lost strength, I need to push it harder. No, you're probably just fatigued and you need to take the day off or train lighter, go easier. So it's just a way to keep people from getting injured. You want to keep the goal and be lifelong lifters. And so that's why we have to still be mindful about form and technique. I'm not ready to say rounding doesn't matter at all, but I do know that people have been using fear mongering too much, focusing on it too much, and certain lifts, and then, but it's the nature of the internet, right? Like certain influencers, that's how they get their attention. They might not even know that about themselves, that they've pigeonholed themselves as the exercise hater. Like, they're the ones who say, this exercise sucks for this purpose. And I don't like to see it, because you post that and people say, oh, so-and-so said this exercise is a bad one. And it's like, every exercise is good depending on the situation,
Yeah. And I think when it comes to creating content as well, content creators and influencers, or whatever you want to call them, they need to remember who they're posting for and what is the message that they're posting trying to achieve. If you're posting nuanced details about a lateral raise or a abduction or whatever it might be, I don't get me wrong, there's 100% a time and a place for that. But somebody who's reading that, like if you're trying to get somebody to go into the gym and train hard and get strong, or if you're trying to get somebody to become a part of your brand or join your program, whatever it is, do you think they're going to read that and look at all that scientific fucking, jargon and be like, wow, I'm so motivated to get into the gym right now, versus posting a video of one of your clients crushing it and praising them, and then they see that person working hard and getting strong and showing off their PBs? That's like, oh my God, she's doing it, I can do it. Or posting even like a fun variation, like I've got my 6-6-6-6 hip thrust, or like I come up with cool little combos, because it's very practical stuff that people can go into the gym, they can watch that and be like, oh, that looks awesome, I'm really excited to go and train now, I'm feeling motivated to get in there and crush it. That's what I want. That's the message that I want to be able to put out to people, is giving them energy through my screen rather than just education. I think that education is very important to be a part of that. But if you're just trying to educate people on nuanced details and not putting that energy and passion and, purpose behind it all, then I feel like you're leaving a lot on the table.
Yeah, for sure.
One more thought. I just thought of something else. You know why this frustrates us? Because we care about the truth. Like we're passionate individuals, because we want, when you see that this guy, Johnny Influencer just made another post about how bad this exercise sucks, or how this is the only way you should perform the deadlift, and any deviation from it is injurious. Well, it all makes sense now with this whistleblower, with Facebook, because that's why those stress me out, because I'm like, those posts stress me out, because then now it makes sense. They reward inflammatory material. We know that post is going to get all these views, and we could do that. Hell, if I just cared about followers, I could just bashed everything. Now it makes sense. They've been rewarding that this whole time, and not rewarding the scientists and the people who are, it's very, very frustrating. We've had our work cut out for us, and that's why there's so much pseudoscience in this world. That's why there's so many, we've seen in the last couple of years, there's been this crazy rise of pseudoscience, conspiracy theories, just toxic culture, the cancel culture, all these things that have made it very easy to just be, negative things get a lot more shares. Yeah. How about that fake study about the hip thrust that went viral? I can't make a post that ever outdoes that. Got shared so much because it was a fake study. So the social media algorithms with Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg purposely, knowingly letting that happen. And I think that's why it makes us so mad. Hopefully, if it were just up to the algorithms, like there weren't algorithms, it was just up to the people. That's how it was back in the day with Facebook and when Instagram started, and I had power. Cool, this guy can say this, I'll come right back and say this, and my stuff will get shared more times than his because I'm right, or like I'm more scientific. He's wrong. And then the scientists or the truth, we lost our power to be able to battle that. And that's what I wish more people realized. I keep reading all these articles about Facebook and seeing all this stuff about, the algorithms and how, I don't know if you guys have been following it, but I've never seen anything from an influencer's perspective and how they cut off our legs. We have no power. We can't right the wrongs. We can't correct these mistruths out there. We write something And I mean, I wish I could show people, hey guys, this study was fake. It never happened. You saw it spread virally and it's a made up study. That would get 10,000 likes. Whereas everyone posted that, it probably got shared a million times. It was anti-hip thrusts, squats are better than hip thrusts. No, they're not. Like that, I can't battle these people because of the way the algorithms were. So I think that's why it angers us, because we see these guys make these posts and we know they're going to have wide reach, and it shouldn't be that way. But I don't think we'd get as worked up about it. You can tell all three of us, it's like, and I know the people you're talking about, Andrew, like, and you're like, oh, they did it again. They bashed this because it's going to get spread and shared, and then you're left. And what annoys me about it is it increases the workload for me, because I have to spend time answering, 10 DMs that night. Thoughts? Whenever you get thoughts,
I hate that. Yeah.
Because they're sending you this stupid post and you have to go, no, that's not true. Don't listen to that person. They don't know what they're talking about. But yeah, I think it makes sense now. Now it makes more sense to me. I've thought that all along, but now we have actual internal documents from Facebook showing this is why it happens. And I don't mean to derail this whole podcast, but social media shouldn't be that way. It should just be like, let the people decide what goes viral. Let the people decide, because I had power. Then it wouldn't have worked us up. It's like, go ahead, talk all your smack. I'll correct it. And you won't be able to, you can't spread, your information can't spread faster than mine because we're on equal footing. No, if you're negative and bashing things, they actually got rewarded for it.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I think as well, like they feed into a lot of content that you see feeds into just society's psychological response to content as well. People want to see the best or the worst or the do this, the don't do that. But it's not, we don't like, people want to be giving bests, worsts, or betters or whatever, or yes and no's, but it's not a black and white. Like not everything's black and white. Like almost everything is gray. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with creating a top 5 best or whatever it is, or a don't ever do this or whatever, if it's contextually appropriate. But like, I always tell people there is no best. You know what I mean? Like there is no better. Like this is your individual journey where you should be experimenting with different techniques, different stances, different exercises to suit you. So stop looking for the best and start searching for your best. That's going to help you to be able to stick to something that you actually enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. All right, last topic. We've gone for probably over an hour already. This is squats versus hip thrusts. You both said that hip thrusts would be the pick in terms of glute hypertrophy. The question will be why, but first of all, a bit of context. So Bret, you've already mentioned that study that went viral last year that has been discredited and was effectively fabricated, and the amount of squat gains that they got was just ridiculous, and they kept retracting things within the study, and it was effectively discredited. And I know you copped a shit ton of heat around that time saying that hip thrusts are bullshit and, squats have always been better and all this. Why did you both opt for hip thrusts over squats in terms of glute hypertrophy when I asked that question?
Bret, you want to lead?
You can go first, yeah.
Pardon?
You go first.
Okay, cool. Look, I do and don't like this question because I think do both. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was going to actually say that. The question is an annoying question because I get it all the time, because I'll just effectively say, just do both as well.
Exactly right. Well, I created, I think it's like a 25-minute video. Bret, you featured in it, I'm pretty sure, actually. Or was it that one that you featured in? Maybe not, but it was listing the 10 differences between squats and hip thrusts and why they're both great and why they're both so different. For example, squats, I'm not going to go through every single topic because I could turn that into another 30-minute video. But for example, squats are a big compound multi-joint movement where it requires a lot of skill, a lot of technique. You're blasting the quads, toasting the glutes, trashing the adductors, your erectors, your upper back. They're fantastic for building overall strength. Particularly the lower body, but they also beat you up a lot. You know what I mean? They also target more lower glutes as well. And they're also a lot more taxing, I find, as well. Whereas doing hip thrusts, it's the exact opposite. Hip thrusts, they're far less taxing lift. They train the glutes in a shortened range. You can train them more frequently. You can progressively overload them really, really well. Do they work the quads and hams a little bit, but nowhere near as much as the counterpart to squats would with distributing load across different muscle groups. Like, it's not a glute isolation exercise, but it's very glute dominant. So, and not only that, but the reason why I would say hip thrusts over squats is because you could ditch squats and you could still lunge and you could still deadlift and you could still do a variety of other exercises, good mornings, and still get a really great effect for loading the glutes in a similar pattern. Whereas hip thrusts, I mean, yeah, you've got kickbacks, you've got back extensions, you've got other exercises that work in end range, but hip thrusts, one of the only exercises where you can really get strong, really focus on hitting PBs and progressively overloading in that shortened range to be able to get really high activation and, as mentioned, be able to train them frequently, which we mentioned earlier that the glutes can handle. So definitely do both. But if that was gunned ahead and they said you can only pick one, I would say, okay, cool, I'm going to hip thrust.
Right.
I mean, the biggest argument in favor of hip thrust is that everyone thinks that you get the most tension in a muscle in a stretched position, but that's muscle specific. Every muscle is unique. You actually get more tension in the glutes at end range, around neutral. Other muscles you develop, if you think about like biceps, all right, if you go too short and then try to squeeze your biceps, you can't feel it as much. It's not as dense. If you go all the way in the stretch and try and flex it, it's not as dense. There's a sweet spot, where you get the hardest muscle contraction.
So I just feel like flexing my biceps now. Yeah.
If you got the excuse to, but anyway.
Brett's still trying to out-angle us.
With the glutes, you get a bigger contraction at end range, a hip extension. So, and that's a complex, like people don't know that. They all think because they took one biomechanics class in their life and they heard that whatever, you get most tension in a muscle at like 1.2 or 1.3 times the resting length. That's not true for the glutes. So based on the fact that you get the most active muscle force in the gluteus maximus at around a neutral-ish position, then it makes sense that we'd want an exercise that's the hardest at that position.
Yeah.
For that reason alone, I would choose hip thrust over squats. But that's a scientific answer. Aden and I, we learned so much more in the gym when you out of the gym. Before hip thrust came along, I was training people hip thrust. When I thought up the hip thrust, it greatly accelerated my ability to develop nice glutes. Now, Aden touched on some of these topics earlier, but this brings up an interesting conversation around what if we wanted to provide evidence? What if we wanted to put them to a test in a study? How would you create a fair study? You can't have different volumes. You need to have volume equated to appease the peer reviewers. Well, then what would your volume be? Or what would your frequency be? How many times would be, if you're saying, I want you to squat for glute development, how many times would you have your clients squat per week? 2, 3, 2 or 3, right? I wouldn't have them squat 6 days a week. But what if you said you're going to try to maximize your client's volume or glute development with hip thrusts, and they're only going to do hip thrusts? I would probably have them hip thrust 5 days a week. And 3 of the days being like barbell or like pause, and then 2 of the days maybe being a lighter method, like knee banded, like constant tension, or 1 1/4 reps or pulses or something. There's so much variety, and they don't beat people up as much because they work you in a shorter muscle position. You don't get the muscle damage. You don't get beat up systemically because they're not working the other muscles as much. So you can perform it more frequently. So then if you carried out a study, you'd have to have, sorry, this is where my glute squad starts hitting me up around now. I train them remotely, living in Vegas, and they all start hitting me up. Oh, 1 sec. So anyway, it would be hard to carry out a study that was fair. You'd almost have to have lots of groups. You'd have one group squatting twice, 2 or 3 times a week, one group hip thrusting 2 or 3 times a week, one group squatting 5 days a week, one group hip thrusting 5 days a week. Then you'd also, ideally, you'd have a combined group to show what we're talking about, that you get the best results doing both. So you'd have a combined group matching volume, and then a combined group with additive volume. And so it's really hard to prove, or like to provide evidence for one over the other. I think it's going to take a long time for us to be confident in our answer. But I will say hip thrusts activate the upper gluteus maximus and the glute medius more, whereas they also activate the lower gluteus maximus more, but you tend to get more soreness in the lower glutes because of the stretch. How important is that stretch? There's a lot of studies showing range of motion is important. Is that the same for every muscle group? Is that less important? Is range of motion less important for glutes, or is it more? There's one study indicating that deeper squats are better than shallower squats. I don't quite trust that study. It's by Kubo. I'd like to duplicate it because I'd like to see how they squat. And that's another thing in the research that I wish we could move. Research, our policies and practices with research started like centuries ago. It was written because that's how you communicated. Now we have the digital age. Why can't we film? Here's one subject doing. How nice would it be if there was a link? Here's their form, because you know that you could have done a half squat or a quarter squat straight up where your knees just move forward and it works no glutes whatsoever. What if you sit back, lean a little, sit back, spread the knees, and really load up the glutes? You can feel the glutes a lot in a half squat. But anyway, I'm going to ramble on and on. If I was given as a trainer with a 25 years of experience, if you said you get to pick one lift, Aden, you get squats, and Bret, you get hip thrusts, or vice versa, and yeah, go for it. You have 100 clients, you have 6 months, you can only use that one exercise. I would take the hip thrust any day of the freaking week. And anyone who says differently, I don't think they have ample experience with both lifts. I think a lot of times it's the power lifters that have only squatted, and a lot of times it's the men who are taking stuff, or who had good glute development to begin with, and they develop with anything. They don't realize how hard it is for some of these women. I mean, hell, go to a local powerlifting meet. If squats and deads were the best, like for glute development, all powerlifters would have amazing glute development. You go to these local meets, not the national level meets, but the local meets, and you see people in their singlets and they have no glutes at all. And you're like, man, that's one thing I told Ashton, my high school kid. He's got the most gigantic quads and no glutes. He's already 2 months in, he has way bigger glutes already, and he's getting stronger, go figure. Squats and deads, he was doing them like crazy. He wasn't developing glutes. He's now developing glutes from the hip thrusts and other stuff I'm having him do.
I think the other thing that doesn't get mentioned enough is when you do a hip thrust, you take the upper body out of it, and it's obviously
and the coordination out of it, right?
Exactly. It takes that element out of it. So like a lot of women will struggle with a back squat because they're obviously holding the bar on their back. And then with a deadlift, they're struggling to even hold the bar, and their grip's the limiting factor. Yeah. So that's one of the other massive reasons why I use hip thrust so much. And, you'll see the hip thrust gains just fly up and up and up, and they can often hip thrust just as much as many men. But then it's very different when it comes to deadlifts. They're often struggling with the grip.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to segue into as well. Is squats are phenomenal, but like for some people, like, you know what I mean. Like I consider myself to be a fucking fantastic technique coach. Some people either one, just don't have the mechanics to squat very well, or two, they just don't enjoy them very much because there's so much technicality around them, or three, they don't enjoy them because they're really fucking hard and they beat the fucking shit out of you. So that's why I have 5 or 6 different squat machines at the booty base. So I say, guess what? If you don't like this, we're going to go start over the machine. We're going to get you really strong on that, build your confidence up, build your strength up. I've never had to do that with hip thrusts. Hip thrusts, they get in there, they can nail them pretty well on their first time doing it. And not only that, but you can see significant strength gains with hip thrust really quickly. And I think that that's really empowering for females. Because I feel like hip thrust, like Bret kind of mentioned, it's not a female lift, but it's primarily owned by girls and Bret. You know what I mean?
I think the other thing about the squat, because obviously the weight on their back, they often complain about it and they don't like it. So going to something that splits that stance, such as a split squat, Bulgarian, a lunge, something like that, you're halving the weight, but the relative load on the single leg is actually often more because of the potential bilateral deficit. You know, someone might be able to squat 80 kilos, but they might be able to Bulgarian 45.
I would pick for glute.
Oh, they can usually Bulgarian like 70.
Or a reverse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But they stay more upright, so it doesn't give them the problems, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
I'd pick a Bulgarian or a like reverse lunge or something like that for glute development over a squat any day of the week.
Pick a lunge.
How much you can manipulate the load or the body positioning, or it's just if I do walking lunges or Bulgarians, my glutes are absolutely cooked.
Yeah, completely agree. Love it. I think we'll leave it there. I think that's been nearly an hour and a half. Now, just quickly, where can all the listeners find you? Both of you, Aden?
For me, just come to my Instagram at Glute Guru. Type in glute, and you'll probably see Bret come up, and then you'll probably see me come up.
Bret?
Yeah, same. Glute Guy, I think I come up, but Bret Contreras won. This poor Bret Contreras guy who got this before me, he must be tagged all the time and like, what? Why is this guy obsessed with glutes? But yeah, Bret Contreras won. And yeah, I guess my blog is bretcontreras.com. I'm planning on start blogging more, but I always say that.
And your strength line as well, BC Strength, I can attest it's great. I've got a fair few of your products and I'm waiting for some of them to come back into stock in Australia. I was actually nearly tempted to get a order shipped from the US, but I think it was $800 for shipping or something. I was like, no, I'll just wait.
Shipping Casco lately
it's crazy, isn't it?
I know.
Anyway, so you can find this podcast on Google, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all that jazz. Thank you so much for your time, both of you. Any last words of wisdom?
I just want to say thank you guys for this opportunity. Aden, it's always nice having a someone fighting the same battles, and it's so nice that we agree on everything. I'm like, feel like if I passed away, my work can continue on through you because we're like clones. We've come to the same conclusions through our training of others. So it's nice. But Andrew, this was a great idea. Thank you for carrying it out. And it's we need more of these types of podcasts where we have a couple people on and we can hear different takes on issues, you know?
Yeah, I really love the round table setup. I think it blends well. Aden?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first things, thanks for having both of the Booty Bros on here, and thanks Bretty for the kind words. It's funny, it's like because the funny thing is I didn't actually even know that you existed until I looked up Glute Guru as if a name was available on Instagram, and I was like, oh, this guy's already doing it, and I was like, fuck, damn, and then I found out that he's pretty much the exact same bloke as me, just on the other side of the world, who's just been doing this for a little bit longer, and it's crazy how similar we are.
More grades.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, well, yeah, I know you've gone for the Leonidas look. You know,
I know, I just dyed it.
But it's actually crazy sometimes how similar myself and Bret are in both with professionally and personally. And maybe a lot of that just comes from the fact that we are practical application people. You know what I mean? And we actually have a lot of experience in the field working with people, building relationships with people, and yourself as well, Andrew, too. You know what I mean? I think it's really important to be able to have people who actually work with people to be having these discussions, because there's so many like online trainers and people who just read things and they try to sound smart and they don't actually train anybody and they don't have a lot of experience to be able to share other than their own. So it's always nice having these chats, and hopefully we can, keep them going.
Amen to that. Thanks
Keep
again, guys. Yeah, exactly. Keep fighting the good fight. Appreciate your time, and we'll have to do a 2.0 very soon.
Definitely.
As usual, guys, stay strong.